All right, we're going to broaden our discussion just a little bit here.
Indeed. Joining us again, journalist Zaid, Jilani, and Democratic strategist Michael Starr Hopkins. Michael, you were just informing us. We were on here doing the show, but apparently right after the debate, there was an exchange directly between Warren and Sanders that looked a little tense.
Yeah, so
what was the takeaway there?
Describe it. We don't have the video for the audience.
So it looks like Sanders and Warren walked up to each other. Sanders reached out to shake her hand, and she kind of got in his face, and it looked like they had some pretty tense words while Steyer awkwardly in the background kind of sat back. But I mean, that kind of seemed like the moment of the debate, what we were all waiting for.
Wow, yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah, what do you make of that, Zaid?
I'm guessing Sanders was trying to be classy. I mean, he's trying to shake her hand. She wouldn't shake back.
Yeah.
And this is, sorry, to get, a little righteous about this. This is after she and her team leaked details of a private conversation trying to smear him as sexist, and she's the one up at arms? I'm sorry, but that's outrageous.
All the post-debate analysis with all the CNN people talking about how great she did and how she handled that moment, how she pitched to women. By the way, being chauvinistic about your demographic is historically not good in elections. I mean, the way you handle it is someone like John Kennedy. I mean, JFK said, I'm not the Catholic candidate for president. I'm a candidate for president who happens to be Catholic. I mean, he made it a non-issue, and that's how he won. Once you start touting it as an advantage, people start getting turned off. Like, wait, I should vote for you just because you're an X?
Right.
And that's the twofer. I'm sure Joe Rossberg, Roger Lau, the people in her campaign, pitched this to her, said, hey, you can hit Sanders, and then on that campaign stage, you can pitch out to all the Hillary people, say, hey, we're going to do I'm with her again.
Right.
And, it may not play out exactly how she determines it, how she seems to think it's going to happen.
Turns out men vote too.
It's absolutely not going to play out. Michael, I do want to get your reaction to that Iraq war clip, though. That's one of the first things that we immediately saw in this debate. Funnily enough, Zaid predicted Biden's response. Do you think Biden put that to bed? Is that going to be enough, or are we going to continue to see this? The Sanders people are not going to let this go. It's going to keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Sanders campaign is definitely going to be the one that continues to bring this up. I don't really see any of the other campaigns making a big deal out of it. I think maybe Mayor Pete will use it to talk about more of his military experience.
It's a personal issue,
exactly,
like everything else.
He had a great anecdote about seeing a friend or a fellow soldier's son run up to hug him, which I think he's going to continue to try to do.
Yeah, I mean, what did you make of that, Zaid? I mean, you literally predicted the words out of Biden's mouth. Frankly, I think Biden had a very good night, and I think that was a phenomenal answer for him for a huge portion of the Democratic electorate, which is Obama trusted me, you should trust me.
Oh, I think it was an excellent night for Biden. I mean, I think CNN was so impressed by their own story, which was pitched by Warren and all this flash and glamour. But at the end of the day, Biden had to defend himself against attacks. He was barely attacked except by Bernie, and he easily parried it. And I think that, Biden's kind of making the electability argument for himself, right? In that he kind of gets under attack by Trump, he gets under attack by all these Democrats, and he just kind of waves it away. And that's kind of showing the level of stature that you have to be able to survive this process. And I think if the other candidates don't show that, Biden is going to continue to kind of lead this race in that regard.
So did Bernie Sanders do what he needed to do?
No, he didn't do it.
Yeah.
For one, his campaign seems paralyzed by this ideological affinity for Warren, who's obviously not into him. She was trying to destroy him. You can only ask someone out on a date so many times.
I think those days are over. Yeah.
But no, seriously, she has an interest to cooperate with him eventually. Eventually, he may offer her VP, he may need her delegates, but right now she's attacking him very hard. She set the entire tone and narrative of the debate.
She did, yeah.
You have to attack back. You have to question her trustworthiness. This is someone who told an activist that her kids go to public school, and she said that, no, they go to private schools.
Right.
One of her kids actually went for private school for half of his life. I mean, she embellishes the truth to benefit herself. She's done this on numerous issues and topics. In 2012, running against Scott Brown, when I was working to elect her, she was saying, look, I am a Native American. He said, hey, she's not a person of color. She's not a Native American. She said, no, I am. 2019, she said, no, I'm not a person of color. I mean, this is...
And has never complained about when she figured that out and how she figured it out.
She's straight up lied.
She lied.
Yeah.
Okay? Sanders has to have the mettle to actually deal with this.
He's not going to do it, Zaid.
But see, I'm going to disagree with you, though, because I agree with your initial point that this doesn't work out for her the way that her team thinks it does. It ultimately is not a good look. I mean, this was her whole brand, Michael, was that she's the unifier and she can bring the elements of the party together. And so for you to come out with an attack that is so off-brand and so vicious.
So personal.
And so personal to someone who, up until this very moment, you have called a friend and an ally, which now all of that seems very disingenuous.
And plus, she's been attacking the entire time. She was attacking Biden earlier in the race. She called him a Republican. She's been attacking Pete over his fundraising. Now she's attacking Bernie, but she's also saying she's a unifier.
Right, they all want want to cry unity. And she pretended to be so offended that a volunteer would use a call script, accurately pointing out.
It may work, but I think there's a bigger issue than Warren though going on here. That she may very well self-immolate, but then there's still Biden standing there.
Yes.
And the way that you attack someone like Biden is not by trying to trip up on a debate stage. The way you do it is by running negative TV ads, negative radio commercials, the kind of things that are typical in campaigns. And the question is, Bernie Sanders has never in his life done that in any campaign. Is he willing to do that?
Well, I will say in our conversation with Brianna just now, she indicated specifically on Social Security that they were thinking of radio ads, that they had some things queued up in the mix on that to make the case, which is an incredibly important one that didn't come up tonight, but one that is top of mind for many, many voters in the Democratic primary and in the country at large. So I think that their strategy is essentially, look, Bernie is not going to be the Iron Fist. He's just not going to do it. It's just not his thing. So you have the surrogates doing it. You have the op-eds posting. You have the ads coming out. And I don't know that Zaid is correct, because if you look at the polling right now, it is my belief that if Bernie goes into Iowa tied or leading, he's going to win Iowa because he outperforms his polls. If he goes into New Hampshire tied or leading, he's going to win because he outperforms his polls. I think if he does those two things, he's in very good position to win.
Yeah, I got to say, and this is going to come as a surprise because I've been so critical of Senator Sanders.
Yeah.
I think tonight it became a two-person race.
Yeah.
I think it now looked like Biden and Sanders and then everyone else trying to jockey for that second spot. And I think that that's the perfect spot for Sanders to be in right now, heading into Iowa. And I think that, Sanders now, you saw him talk less about democratic socialism and talk more in general terms and more about ideology, which I think is part of his desire to switch to more of a movement kind of thing. And I think that's how he's going to start bringing more people over into his tent.
Smart. And to that point, I mean, you saw this diametrically opposed vision on trade in particular. I want to play a piece of sound that we have about the two candidates talking about NAFTA. I think Biden even accused him of saying there's not a trade deal in the world that this guy would vote for. Let's take a listen to that.
We should be focusing on equipping American workers to do that. And by the way, the idea, I don't know that there's any trade agreement that the senator would ever think made any sense. But the problem is that 95% of the customers are out there. So we better figure out how we begin to write the rules of the road, not China.
Senator Sanders.
Joe and I have a fundamental disagreement here, in case you haven't noticed. And that is NAFTA, PNTR with China, other trade agreements were written for one reason alone, and that is to increase the profits of large multinational corporations. And the end result of those two, just PNTR with China, Joe, and NAFTA, cost us some 4 million jobs as part of the race to the bottom. I am sick and tired and will not tolerate, and we will use the power of the federal contracting system. If a corporation in America wants to shut down in Iowa or Vermont or any place else, and then they think they're going to get online for a generous federal contract, they've got another thing going. We need some corporate responsibility here, and we need to protect good-paying jobs in America, not see them go to China, Mexico, Vietnam,
Mr.
and
Vice
other low-wage
President, what's
countries.
your response?
I mean, Zaid, to your point, which is that while Zaid, I mean, like you said, while all this is happening, Joe Biden is sitting there, he's sitting pretty, and he just outlined the case for TPP, right? Like, this is a guy who is still going to advocate for TPP in the year 2020, and apparently has not seen what happened to Hillary Clinton in 2016. What did you make of it?
I mean, I think that is the electability argument for the general election, and I think Sanders does make a very fair point that on these major issues that Trump used to destroy Clinton, he could very well do the same thing to Biden. However, the question is, can he get that message to the Democratic voters? And I think there's such a strong emotional attachment to Biden to so many people who are not political diehards for understandable reasons. People are busy, they have lives, they have families, not everyone's a nerd. Can he get that message to those people who are casually watching the election? Just think of Biden as kind of a safe, solid choice, an electable guy. And I think that's where the point comes in. I think Bernie may end up doing well in those early states, but as it gets into some of the South and parts where Biden is extremely solid right now. And let's remember, what Warren did to Bernie, Warren is not a master political operator. She's very cutthroat at times, but she's not a master political operator. I think Biden's going to have dozens of articles of that caliber going against Bernie. He has a super PAC. You have to understand that. Michael Bloomberg's in this race. He could drop $100 million of negative advertising on Bernie. All these things are coming. And I think that is when the rubber hits the road in terms of Bernie is a very, very good campaigner who really connects with average, ordinary people. And I think that might help in these early states. But once it gets serious, once the entire Democratic establishment says this is the guy we need to kill off, how is it going to handle that? And that's the question.
But let me ask you on the substance. There was a moment that I found really obnoxious, which is that Biden's answer was that I won't allow corporate interests to write trade deals if I'm president. Well, corporate interests wrote TPP. I mean, that was overwhelmingly who was at the table under the Obama-Biden administration. So again, the record says differently.
Let's talk about corporate interests, though. And this is an area where every candidate who's running against Biden is falling down. Biden's own son was hired by MBNA, the credit card industry, as Biden was deregulating that industry. Now Biden's son was apparently an expert on Ukrainian gas.
Yes.
These issues are not being brought up by anybody except for Donald Trump. And maybe for them that poisons the issues with Democrats, but the reality is that Trump is to some extent correct, and he's going to use those attacks in a general election. But the Democrats themselves are not holding Biden to account on these issues. They're making it seem as if it's a philosophical issue. There's a broad philosophical disagreement with Biden. We'll argue about philosophy, but it may be a more kind of coherent core issue about personal corruption and prestige and power.
So let's talk about this also, Michael. Not only just on that part, but at the very end, Biden's closing statement, which this is about character. This was a Hillary Clinton, our kids are watching commercial all over again. All I could think in my head was love trumps hate. And yet, how do you still make that case in the year 2020 after you see it crash and burn in 2006?
Because for whatever reason, he's decided to continue running that campaign like we've talked about. I do think that we should just make a rule. No more intros, no more outro statements at the end of the debates. It's a waste of time. Nobody listens.
The whole phrase debates are a waste of time at this point.
Which is, what is the Biden pitch? Character, right? We cannot afford.
But he wants to make it a referendum on Trump.
They put character already on the ballot, and it didn't work. And this is before, by the way, look, I criticize the economy and the structure all the time, but as it's currently structured, I think it's badly structured. It's doing okay. I mean, you saw half the Democratic candidate, the only Democratic candidate to criticize the new NAFTA deal is Bernie Sanders. The rest of these candidates are endorsing their opponent's trade deal. That's a big deal. I mean, like, he has accomplished something. Not all of what he ran on, but something.
Well, and here's the other thing with the character argument is if you're going to make the moralistic character argument, you got to be pure as the driven snow, and your son better not be, cashing in with credit card companies and sitting on Ukrainian oil and gas boards, which look, people hate when I say this on the left, but this is reality, and this is what's going to be leveraged against him. And whether there was real corruption or just an appearance of conflict of interest or just the normal swampy D.C. mess, this is going to be a problem for him if he goes up against President Trump.
It is, and I think Democrats are making a mistake by not litigating this during the primary. But I think the reason for that is there's been such a negative pushback against candidates being perceived as going after each other. Look at what happened with Castro. Look at what happened with Senator Harris. I mean, it's viewed as almost disqualifying to go after someone, especially Joe Biden. And so I think what Democrats should worry about is we're going to head into a general not having fine-tuned those messages and those responses.
Hey, what did you think of Tom Steyer tonight?
I thought Steyer had a good night.
He had a great night.
Steyer
is doing something that Senator Sanders has done really well and not many other candidates have done. Have a very simplified message, which is easy to understand, and say it over and over and over again. Trump was a master at that in 2016. You could name exactly what he was about. Build the wall, make America great again. And that's what he said over and over and over again. If you ask people what Hillary's message was, it was, these esoteric things that you couldn't really understand. That's got to be the winning message.
So final thoughts, Zed. Who won, who lost? What do you think?
Well, I think it was a good night for Biden. I think Warren will get a little bit of a media bounce, but I think she's also polarized a lot of people, so it probably won't help her that much overall in the race. And otherwise, I think everyone's kind of holding steady. There weren't a whole lot of fireworks in the debate other than maybe the Bernie Sanders Warren kind of moment in the debate and then the handshake issue.
The handshake issue. All right, thanks so much for being here, guys. We appreciate what you did double duty for us, and we're really grateful. All right, coming up, we're going to have our extra special Team Rising panel, but first, another look back at that moment when Bernie Sanders was asked about whether he told Elizabeth Warren a woman could not be president.
Well, as a matter of fact, I didn't say it. And I don't want to waste a whole lot of time on this because this is what Donald Trump and maybe some of the media want. Anybody knows me knows that it's incomprehensible that I would think that a woman could not be president of the United States. Go to YouTube today. There's a video of me 30 years ago talking about how a woman could become president of the United States. In 2015, I deferred, in fact, to Senator Warren. There was a movement to draft Senator Warren to run for president. And you know what? I stayed back. Senator Warren decided not to run, and I did run afterwards. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million votes. How could anybody in a million years not believe that a woman could become president of the United States? And let me be very clear. If any of the women on this stage or any of the men on this stage win the nomination, I hope that's not the case. I hope it's me. But if they do, I will do everything in my power to make sure that they are elected in order to defeat the most dangerous president in the history of our country.
So, Senator Sanders, I do want to be clear here. You're saying that you never told Senator Warren that a woman could not win the election.
That is correct.
Senator Warren, what did you think when Senator Sanders told you a woman could not win the election?
I disagreed. Bernie is my friend, and I am not here to try to fight with Bernie. But look, this question about whether or not a woman can be president has been raised, and it's time for us to attack it head on. And I think the best way to talk about who can win is by looking at people's winning record. So, can a woman beat Donald Trump? Look at the men on this stage. Collectively, they have lost 10 elections. The only people on this stage who have won every single election that they've been in are the women.